crime files of Los Angeles digs into the old criminal files to review what were the true facts of some of the most interesting and sensational cases of all times. Here we go behind the scenes to review what the detectives did in the investigation, how they tracked down the criminals. Further, we examine the jury trial to see what evidence was presented to the jury. And in the end, we reveal the results of the case as well as what happened to all of those various characters in the case. So let's get started today on the case that we've selected to examine. What were the facts? Well, what's our topic today? It is the Black Widows, better known as the Golay and Rutterschmidt case. To understand about this case, we need to go to the date of June 21st, 2005, just before midnight, and in an alleyway that runs parallel to Westwood Boulevard in West Los Angeles, there's a man lying dead in the middle of the alley. What happened? You can see there's a bicycle. It looks like it's been run over. It's been crushed somehow, and it looks like a hit and run. Somebody must have hit him, knocked him down, killed him. But there are no witnesses. There's nobody around. So what happened? The next question is, who was he? And we learned that his name is Kenneth McDavid. He was a homeless man. And what was interesting about the case is that two elderly women came into LAPD's West Traffic Division asking for the traffic report on it. They said that they needed that traffic report in order to file for life insurance benefits. Now, the detective had a little more work to do on it, so he continued to work on it. He told him that, he should have the report in about a week. So he continued to get all the facts that he needed for the traffic report. And he was talking to one of the fellow detectives that worked across from him, and he said, this is a crazy case. These two elderly women claim to be cousins of this homeless man, and they want to apply for life insurance benefits. And the other detective said, wait just a minute, I had a case just like that. And he said, 5 years ago, I had a Paul Vados case in which he was run over, and two elderly ladies asked for the traffic report. And then he said to the other detective, what's the name of these women? And the detective said, well, Helen Golay and OLGA Rutterschmidt. The other detective, oh my God, that's the same ladies that were in asking for a traffic report on this case I worked on back in 1999. It involved a homeless man who was run over in an alley just off of the La Brea Boulevard. It looked like it was a hit and run. Somehow he was run over. Must have been a car coming along there at nighttime and struck him. So who are these concerned cousins who are, trying to get life insurance benefits? Well, let's examine each one of them. Let's take the one, Helen Golay, who was kind of the leader of the two. She was more flamboyant. Her heyday kind of had passed, but she was in the real estate business in Santa Monica and had done it for a number of years and was very successful at selling houses in the Santa Monica area. And as a matter of fact, she was able to buy it was like a duplex, quite a nice house not too far from the ocean. I think it was 2 blocks away. And you would see her driving around Santa Monica in her SUV, Mercedes. Very, very active in the real estate business. Now, as to OLGA Rutterschmidt, her background was a little bit different. She had this, hair, the salt and pepper hair, elderly looking. She and her husband owned and operated a coffee shop in the Hollywood area. And they did that for many years until he passed away. And then she eventually sold the coffee shop. And she lived, which was interesting, right behind the Grauman's Chinese Theater. There's a big apartment building there, and she had one of the units there. So that was Olga. Now, how did they come in contact with the homeless people in Hollywood? Well, Olga, living in Hollywood, she would go over to the First Presbyterian Church, and she would, talk to the homeless people. There were a lot of them that would congregate in the parking lot where they'd get food, they would get supplies, all sorts of things. So that's how she met them, talked to them, and befriended them. And then she would pay for their housing. And here is just an example where she took care of Kenneth McDavid, paid for a week's housing at the Econo Lodge. And after doing that for a number of months, she got an apartment for him on Cherokee Avenue. Very nice apartment in this building. And she paid all the rent for his everything, all his needs, his supplies, food, and housing. So they needed more information on the gentleman, and they would get this personal information so they could put in for benefits for the men. But they wanted the men to feel secure, to have pride in them, and they took out life insurance policies on each of these homeless men. They would list themselves as maybe a fiance, maybe a cousin, a business partner, but many, many life insurance policies from various life insurance companies. And sometimes, as far as beneficiary, they were joint beneficiaries, and other times it was individual. Now you say, well, how did they get life insurance policies? They were all in poor health. They were all alcoholics or drug addicts. What they did was the women would take them to the various banks there in Hollywood and take out a checking account for them, a minimal amount insurance policy, very, very low amount, sometimes just $10,000. Nobody really cared that much about these minimal policies, and no medical was required. So as the premiums would come in, like quarterly, the women would check a box to change the coverage, to increase it. And you can see in this one, they went all the way up and they wrote in $250,000. Well, the insurance company was just tickled to death to get higher premiums. They never asked for a medical, and none of the men ever had to go to a doctor and be checked up because none of them would have passed a medical. Now, there were other policies that were taken out that were called accidental death coverage. And in those, the health of the individual is not important because it's not based on their health, it's based upon dying from an accident. So that was what they were involved in, but it was a lot of work. And Helen Golay, she had been in business, the real estate business. She knew that she had to streamline things. So she got rubber stamps of the signatures of each of the men they were taking care of so that whenever they had to send something in, they could use the rubber stamp with the signature from it. Now, she was very good at accounting. The important thing about life insurance is you can't miss a payment. You miss a payment and the policy ends. So she had shoe boxes in her house of all the premiums and when they came due, and she knew exactly when they came due so that she would have a check sent to the insurance company before anything could terminate. Now, what was interesting back in this time, the insurance industry had a policy that after 2 years they would not contest a life insurance policy. So they knew this. And here you can see in Paul Vados in September 97, and then 2 years later in 1999, he somehow run over in that alleyway in La Brea. That's 2 years and 1 month. So they generally tried to wait for the 2 years, and in doing so, the policy was never questioned or contested by the insurance company. Now, they would make their claim after the homeless person was run over, and it required a number of things to be done. Here, this was the claim, and here she's claiming to be the cousin, and there was a whole series of documents that they had to fill out. The death certificate, the autopsy, police report, certificate of insurance, goes on and on. But they knew exactly what was needed, and they would have all the documents ready. Now, you're going to say, well, okay, so they had a couple of policies out, and let's say just for Kenneth McDavid, this will give you an illustration of how many policies they had on his life. Look at them. And they claim, as far as the relationship, maybe a fiance, a business partner, sometimes a cousin, but these were substantial amount, $1 million, 800,000. So, and there's more. That was just a group of them. Here's more policies that they took out on Kenneth McDavid. So yes, it was a substantial business for them. And did they make any money off of it? Well, Helen Golay, just on Kenneth McDavid's death, got over a $1.5 million payout in benefits from his death. And then Olga, she got over $500,000 in benefits herself. So yes, it was profitable. Now, as to Paul Vados, the one that we talked about was 5 years earlier, they did exactly the same thing to him. They took out life insurance policies on his life, and they listed themselves as beneficiaries. Many policies, and let's see, in this one, but you can see how many, they didn't have as many. This was when they were first starting out, and you can see they had numerous policies, and they were generally cousins back then, or sometimes fiancé. So they did have quite a few policies, and was it profitable? Well, yes. Back in 1999, when they first started, they made $347,000 just for Helen. As far as Olga, she got $246,000. Yes, it was profitable. They did make a lot of money on these. Now, let's talk about the investigation. You know, how was this case solved? In what way? Well, what evidence? And what evidence is there connecting these women with the car that ran over these men in the alleys? Well, this last one with McDavid, as I say, it was an alleyway parallel to Westwood Boulevard, and they came up with a camera, security camera, and when they got the film back from it, they looked very, very carefully at it, and they could make out, it looked like a MERCURY SABLE, a silver SABLE, and it was going down the alleyway just before McDavid's body was discovered. So now they have something to go with. They know that it most likely is a MERCURY SABLE. Now this map just shows you this is where he was run over in the alleyway, and something happens a block and a half away at Westwood Boulevard, Santa Monica Boulevard. It's a Chevron station, and a car is towed from there. So let's take a look at this. A tow truck picks up a MERCURY SABLE at that Chevron station, and where do they take it? That is the significant thing. How it was solved was that one of the LAPD officers, he was checking with all the life insurance companies that he could find to see if they had policies on McDavid's life. And he called the auto club up and said, oh, by the way, do you have a life insurance policy on a McDavid? And the lady there, the auto club, looked at it and says, you know, we do a lot of life insurance, but no, we don't have him insured. And the detective was just in a complaining mood, and he said, oh, we've got these two women, we think some type of fraud is going on, we don't know what. You know, this McDavid was run over in an alleyway, and he gave the date and so forth. And the lady from Auto Club said, well, wait, let me see if I can check with our roadside assistants. Maybe we have some information there. And she did. She goes, not the life insurance, but she goes into roadside assistance, and then she finds this document on her computer. And there it is. There it is. Chevron gas station, Mercury, Sable, silver in color, and it gives the address it was taken to on Ocean Park in Santa Monica, and it gives a number, and the number up there, the membership, is to a Helen Golay, and there's no question now that Mercury Sable was towed by Auto Club, and here you can see the number. That is Helen Golay's membership number to Auto Club. So now we have a connection to this car. So what about this Mercury Sable at the Chevron? Well, when they work with Auto Club, you know, they want to see how far. They saw that car, that Sable, was towed all the way to Santa Monica, right there to Helen Golay's residence. And you can even see a photograph there. Behind Helen Golay's is the silver Sable. Now, tracking down that car, but they don't have the license plate number. They don't have any type of number on the car. And one of the detectives, when they arrested Helen Golay, there was a day planner in her car, and he was looking through it, and he saw what looked like a license plate number, FYR 482. And it was interesting, the detective recognized, oh, well, that's not a complete number, it's missing a digit. And he realized, oh, and he put in the computer, he put a 4 in there in front of that number, and he ran it. And it came back to a 1999 Mercury Sable. So now they know the car, they know the serial number and the license plate number on it through DMV, and now they know that it was sold. It was sold by one of the Mercury dealerships, and it was bought by a lady by the name of Hillary. So now we know it was Hillary who bought it. But Hillary did not buy it. What happened was that Hillary liked to work out at the Spectrum Club, and she had her purse stolen when she was at the Spectrum Club one day. It just disappeared. Her driver's license was taken, and it was never, ever found. What was interesting was Helen Golay's daughter would frequent that Spectrum at the same time when the purse disappeared. What we ultimately found out was the person who really bought it was Olga Rutterschmidt. She purchased that Sable, and she did it in the name of Hillary. And the ID was similar enough where nobody questioned it. So where was that Sable now? So the detectives had to track it down because it was sold again, and they were able to confiscate it, and they brought it in, and they put it up on a rack to search underneath, and they were taking swabs of tissue and blood in the undercarriage. All of this was taken to the crime lab. It came back to McDavid's DNA. So now there's no question that that is the car that ran over McDavid. And in the process, when they ran over him, either his arm, his leg, or part of his body caught the fuel line. And there's the fuel line. It snapped it. It came off. And when that happened, there was no more fuel going to the engine. And that's why the engine stopped. They coasted down to that service station, and that's where it was picked up and towed over to Helen Golay's place. Now, After they've been arrested, LAPD brings them back to Parker Center and puts them in a room together, an interview room, and the detectives leave. They walk out. They leave the two ladies in there, and Olga is so mad at Helen. And she said, "You did all these extra insurance. That's what raised the suspicion. You can't do that. Stupidity." And she just went on, railing Helen. "No, you're going to go to jail, honey. They are going to lock you up." So even though the two of them had worked together for over 20 years in many, many different scams, they were not real happy at that moment when both of them were arrested. Now, what eventually happened, the case was tried. I did a lot of work putting the case together. It was very, very difficult. And when it came to trial, Olga didn't take the witness stand. And her defense was that she was too stupid. She would never be able to come up with such an elaborate scheme. And that was her defense. It was Helen Golay. There was the brains of the operation, and she was the one who was doing all of the killing and collecting of the money. Now, when Helen Golay, when it was her turn, her defense was, oh, she was too frail. There's no way she could do all of these murders. And she flipped it around and claimed it was her daughter. It must have been her daughter who bought that car, not her or not Olga. So that was their defense. Interesting defenses. They both were convicted of first-degree, premeditated, deliberate murder, conspiracy to commit. And if you think about it, what could be more a premeditated, deliberate murder than planning for 2 years to feed somebody, house somebody, just to kill them and collect on the life insurance? Now, at the time of sentencing, the judge said this to both of them. "These unfortunate men were sacrificed on your altars of greed." A lot of truth in that. And then the judge sentenced both of them to life without the possibility of parole. So, the Black Widows. Well, you decide. Were they Black Widows? What type of premeditated killers were they? Well, hopefully you found this Golay Rutterschmidt case interesting. If you want more information about it, get my book. It was a fascinating book of the old lady killers, what they did and how the case was solved. Just fascinating. So if you want more facts and details, get my book. Otherwise, hopefully you'll join us next time for True Crime Files of Los Angeles by Ronald E. Bowers. See you then.